we all know that CertPro people are harder to teach than others. So
yeah, we're a little bit difficult. We're set in our ways.
It'll be a series of conversations on like Xactimate.
We're kicking off a series of Xactimate Sessions.
From, beginner, step your game up, learning, Xactimate, learning to train other people.
We're going to start from, either the top down or the bottom up.
Enter an audio-visual experience like no other.
Underground rap at its realest.
Any pieces you can offer to our tens of listeners. The aspect I wanted to talk to you about is, a bit of what you've learned in both of those areas.
I think the content estimate was the hardest to learn at first.
Yeah.
What could be used and what couldn't be used, and thinking outside the box.
I remember I went to a large restorer, and the prior estimator had always been just using labor, time, and materials. And so exactly like you're talking about, I taught myself, I started reading all the line items, and we increased our contents, significantly just by utilizing the program.
Xactimate.
No!
And just like you, picking up other estimates, talking to my other project managers, saying, hey, what's the estimate you used previously? And then we also had a production manager that came in that had solely focused on the fire side, and she was very knowledgeable with content estimates and cleaning. And so I was able to learn a lot from her as well.
And then learning to train other people. Any pieces you can offer to our tens of listeners.
Helping you shorten your dang learning curve.
Well, I got to tell you, when we did that short little snippet with you, you did get my wheels spinning again, on like personality types and learning to work with other people. And I think that's a key, element of that. Learning to train other people.
Absolutely subpar.
We're going to bring in our first guest, a local senior project manager restorer. Good morning, Joyce.
Good morning. How are you doing, John?
You and I had the pleasure of meeting together for coffee.
Absolutely subpar.
We have a mutual friend, Luke Drager from Aramsco.
We got the hugger in the house.
The Be
I have
Intentional.
it.
Hey!
In the Be Intentional culture book hug moment.
We got the hugger in the house.
Home of the DYOJO Nation. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
You were so kind to shout out the estimating book. You said that it was subpar and it really didn't help you, but you thought it could maybe help some of your coworkers.
Absolutely subpar. Absolutely subpar. Absolutely subpar. No information for me in there.
Just drivel. I'm issuing you a full refund, and thankfully you didn't spend that much for it anyway.
What would you say you do here?
The DYOJO Podcast.
We all know that CertPro people are harder to teach than others, so.
Yeah, we're a little bit difficult. We're set in our ways.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the DYOJO Podcast. That's right. 2022 is here. Last episode, we talked to Pacific Northwest legend Roger Housen.
I've got the most interesting job in the world. I'm an insurance adjuster.
He is the most interesting man in the world.
He calls them like he sees them.
The insurance company has an amazing tolerance for your pain.
And that's just stupid. Some of the great sound bites that came out of that episode. The appraisal process as it relates to property damage for insurance claims. Some really good input from Roger and many others.
Don't assume that the adjuster you're dealing with knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
I would say this, right? If you are contemplating invoking an appraisal clause, I think this is a good general piece of advice. If you're contemplating invoking appraisal, don't do it blindly. And don't rush into it.
Stay in your lane, bro.
We are picking back up this episode with the Xactimate Sessions. Dang it!
The Xactimate Sessions!
Diving into the topic of Xactimate and learning from other people, some of the mindset and the habits that have helped them be successful. This one today, another Pacific Northwest gem, Joyce Gabriel.
Good morning. How are you doing, John?
She has some really great insights on connecting with and training other people. She was pivotal in the review of book number 3, So You Want to Be a Project Manager. Mindset and Habits for Growth from the Be Intentional series by John Isaacson.
Absolutely subpar.
Looks like a nice book.
Got an autographed copy, buddy. I'm proud to get this. I've been dying for this, and see how I kind of premature opened up the package. So you want to be a project manager, but which I do want to point out that I got my DYOJO sticker on my brick wall in the office.
Born out.
This is my hard copy. If you want one, buy it yourself from Amazon or directly from the DYOJO Podcast, DYOJO. Speaking of which, thank you to our friends and sponsors. We've got the Restoration Industry Association, aka the RIA. If you want to network, if you want to shorten your dang learning curve,
Speaking Sigley Global Watchdog.
meet us in April, the 11th through the 13th at the Peppermill Casino.
It's going to be fabulous.
In Reno, Nevada, for the 2002 International Restoration Convention.
Be there, be square.
We had a lot of fun last year. Shout out to Gordy and Mrs. P. We will have a table somewhere. This time we'll have a few extra beverages to share because people sure like to share or be shared with. Wink, wink.
That's cute. I remember when I had my first beer.
Office Services by Brandy. Last week I said she was a paralyzed bookkeeper, or paralyzed, or her services were paralyzed you. I'm not sure what kind of friggin' tongue twister I pulled there. Oh wow. So, she's not paralyzed, and she won't paralyze you. But if you're paralyzed by your bookkeeping and other office needs, then allow her to remove the shackles and help you fly. Again, oh wow. Office Services by Brandy. Glad to have them as a sponsor. She is good people. And Restoration Technical Institute, Lisa Lavender and the team. RTI provides world-class training designed for those who serve the restoration, cleaning, and industries related to the built environment. If you go to thedyojo.com/podcast, we've got the links to those. They're noted in the show notes as well. Thank you to our sponsors. Get to the show. This is action-packed. We've got several people chiming in, interrupting the conversation, and talking to us about various aspects of things. So you're going to see Ray Titman, who was on the early days of the DYOJO podcast when it was called, do you recall? It was called 3 Questions with the Pro. No, nobody remembers that. Ben Justison again. Geez, when is that guy ever not going to be on the show? Am I right? This is the podcast. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Chris Peterson, Matthew Allen from Adjuster TV, Chris Stanley, IA Path, Uncle Ed Cross, the restoration lawyer. Already mentioned Gordy Powell. We got Eric Sprague and Larry Wilburton, the Blue Collar Nation podcast boys. Robert Moore, and then Jarrett Steer from the GMS podcast. So let's get to it. This is Xactimate Sessions. Xactimate Sessions. I believe this is file 006. We call them files because these are true stories. Okay? These are true, real life stories, accurate accounts of the lives touched by Xactimate.
The DYOJO Podcast.
So we're here with Joyce Gabriel. You're right in our backyard here in Puyallup, beautiful Puyallup, Washington, just south of Seattle for everybody thinks Washington is only Seattle, right?
Right.
And so you're a senior project manager, and by senior, that means you now get the joy of helping teach others and help them develop their Xactimate skills. And that's what this series is about, is Xactimate, running the belts, as it were, in Xactimate.
These stories are true. We're going to attack Xactimate from all different angles.
What do you feel is part of the key difference between learning Xactimate for yourself, right, and then learning to train others to use this program that most people have never even heard of?
What is going on here? Breakfast!
For myself, when I learned, it was grab all the resources that I can. I had an independent adjuster that worked with our office that kind of showed me the ropes, but didn't really show me anything. And so I had to pull older estimates together to see what I was missing, to find additional information. And when I started, there weren't a lot of additional resources out there.
Yeah.
So then it was, coming back and picking his brain and asking him for information on certain areas. Whereas now that they're, 8 years later, there's a lot more resources. The YouTube is what it is now, where it wasn't then. Yeah. And then you have great books.
Oh,
so.
Absolutely subpar.
This book, John, it gave me an inspiration.
Dang.
It is a playbook in how you can progress on. I saw this book on Amazon.
Be intentional
It looked
estimating.
like it was a standalone. It was original. There's nothing like it out there.
Dang.
It is developing your mindset and your habits for success. This book, I read it as soon as I got it. And when I was a water technician, and it actually broke down everything that you would need to think about, hey, this is actually something that I can do.
I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way.
Be Intentional Estimating, the most mediocre book available on the market.
There's nothing like it out there.
Absolutely subpar.
Reaching out to the resources that you have and not being confined to a box. There's a lot of times where I'll go out if I don't know I didn't know the code for the Phoenix temporary heaters. So I actually Googled that as I'm training new people, teaching them that first off, I'm a resource, but then there are other resources out there. And not being afraid to, when you're in a conversation with an IA or somebody, or with even a carrier, and they're like, hey, we don't want you using blankets, furniture blankets on the content estimate, which is, a bone of contention.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we had that conversation of, well, you can pay for the blankets that I provided, or you can pay for the laundering of them, which would you prefer? And then they see the cost difference, but having that conversation with them from a polite, respectful place, and knowing what the carriers prefer. And sometimes it's to your benefit. I know that when I was working with one carrier, they refused to pay for blankets, but they would pay for the washing of them, even though they were $6 a pound and each blanket weighs 7 pounds. So they paid $30 a blanket to wash it versus the $15 it took to cover it and, cover the piece of furniture.
Right. Get it in writing. Get it in writing.
Yep.
Can you hear me? I'm John Isaacson, the DYOJO Podcast, the Intentional Restorer, and we hate adjusters.
Yeah.
So
we know it.
Yeah, we make our living grinding the bones of adjusters and drinking their blood. And so thank you for having me on.
Our side, that's probably the biggest bottleneck for us, for our cycle times, and for having the claims reopen is going to be proficiency in Xactimate, right? Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the book I wrote, Be Intentional Estimating, the most mediocre book there is on the market about estimating with Xactimate. It's more about developing the right mindset and habits, so it's not a how-to. I noticed, I looked up Xactimate beginner videos, and you guys have quite a few. Even Chris Stanley, who we've had on our podcast, IA Path. And your adjuster TV, man, that's quite a database. So I would say if somebody wants to know where to start, you guys have an excellent, library.
So at Adjuster TV, what we try to do is we're trying to elevate our side of the industry, which I think, ultimately, like what you're doing together, we could probably try to elevate both sides of things.
Yeah.
So it's, we take kind of a holistic approach to how we train adjusters. So we're teaching them how to scope, how to be efficient when they're doing scoping, and how to understand policy. Policy is a big part of what we do. And it tends to have some restrictions on what we can do.
Yeah.
Contractors occasionally go butt heads are like, listen, policy says I can't do it, right? So
yeah.
As far as resources for brand new people, on my website, I have some free training on my website that is 5 videos. Each one of them is about at least 15 minutes long. And I think the longest one's like almost 40 minutes long. And it shows how I run through my whole workflow with using Xactimate.
We all know that ServPro people are harder to teach than others. So
yeah, we're a little bit difficult. We're set in our ways. Well, I think it goes back to raising kids. I had 5 children, and 3 of them had individualized education plans in school. One of them was kind of middle of the lane, and one of them could read college level text by 4th grade. So recognizing that, it's not necessarily a disability, it's different abilities.
Yeah.
I believe in a layering effect. So when I'm taking my project managers out and we start scoping a loss, I'll explain to them, this is why it's important now, so that when we layer on the Xactimate piece, you have an understanding. And so when we're scoping, I'll start the same way I would an Xactimate estimate.
Xactimate Sessions. No!
We're going to start from, either the top down or the bottom up. Either the top down or the bottom up. Either the top down or the bottom up. If we're talking subfloor, underlayment, vinyl, baseboard, walls, insulation. And I'll ask them the question rather than telling them, what's behind that wall?
Yeah.
What's behind that wall? And if it's, say it's an interior wall, well, there's nothing, there's framing, right? So what are we going to do with that framing? We're going to clean it, and then we're going to HEPA it or whatever that case may be.
Yep.
And I think that goes along with painting the picture.
Tell the story of the loss.
At the end, when you're actually writing the estimate.
This is the podcast. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
The DYOJO Podcast.
We're here with Ben Justison out of beautiful Moses Lake, Washington.
If you're brand new to the game or you've been doing this for a while, FU pound sand. That's going to help you make better estimates.
Aren't you tired of getting dirt kicked in your face? I am.
Everybody's got something to learn, and
Enlightened Restoration Solutions.
you're going to make your money back on your first estimate.
A lot of value, and he won't let you leave.
Oh boy.
Ben Justison reading Be Intentional Estimating by John Isaacson.
Absolutely subpar.
Once you get to the point where you're not willing to listen or not willing to learn, FU pound sand.
Yeah. And knowing that you have people who are going back to, thinking of how I trained, taught my kids was, is that person tactile? Are they visual?
Yeah.
Do they need a book? Do they need a manual?
Yeah.
And understanding that portion of it and being able to use all of those methods. So that when it comes to sitting in front of a computer and putting it down, they're like, oh, that's right. I touched the wall. I touched the baseboard. I lifted the carpet. When we're going through the process, we're writing out the scope, and then when our technicians get on site, they're actually filling out that scoping document of this is what I actually did.
Yeah.
Right. So there's sometimes where we'll put in there, hey, you need to lift the carpet. You need to remove the pad. You need to detach the baseboard. Or remove the baseboard, and they'll put in there that they removed the pad and they removed the baseboard. But then the question is, well, how did you remove the pad? Because you can't get to it from, the top, from the carpet.
Yep.
So asking those questions. And sometimes it's really obvious when you're looking at the photos. More photos, the better. And it helps tell that story. But it's, again, looking at all of the resources that you have available and knowing that since they've been out on site, they can touch it and they can remember what they did while they were there. Yeah. And then if things went awry, like they scoped it for the carpet to be lifted and the technician cut it out.
Yeah.
Understanding that difference of why that happened and going back to that technician and saying, hey, it was scoped this way. Why did we do it this way? And then having that conversation because either, there were additional, maybe there was growth that was found, something of that nature, or maybe they didn't do it right. And so you're having a different conversation with that person.
Yeah.
Someone posed the question today in one of the socials about teaching your team members to sketch. It's like the cheapest version, the Bosch Professional GLM 20. If you walk a property, take your laser measurements. For those of you that can see, this is using a sketch program called GoodNotes on an iPad with an Apple Pencil. If you take a square, right? One of these squares is, this is 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. This is going to be our corner, okay? Remember, start your corner. Always start your sketch from a corner. So these are 1/4 inch squares. That's a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch equals 2 feet, okay? So if we're going 31/6, we're basically going to go 2, so 32, so we want 16 lines basically. Do you know how to count by twos? Okay, so count by twos starting here till you get to 32. So 2,
4, 6.
32. Okay, so that's our end. Okay. I think some of the most important things, put the door and the swing in your sketch, right? And you'll notice, for those of you that are watching, I like to use notes and colors. Like red would be where the flood cuts are, blue is where the floor was cut out. Whether you're going to be writing it yourself or you're going to be sending it to somebody to write for you, you can only write based on the details you get. This is the Ricoh Theta 2 that we use with DocuSketch, and that puppy is a game changer.
Well, and you touched on the photos. That's essential, right? Because as everyone is well aware, it's commandment number 2. Thou canst not take too many photos, right? From the book
right.
Previously mentioned and credited with all of your success.
Absolutely subpar.
No, it was released last year, and you've been estimating for over 8 years. But those are incidental details.
Right.
But it is part of the reason that's so essential. You can be mad that is the system, but a lot of what you're communicating is to somebody that's reviewing it from a desk, from your photos, from your notes, never having gone to that site. And you can be as mad as you want about that, but that is the reality of especially with COVID, right? But the industry is trending that way. And so, we're all playing the telephone game, right? Like trying to communicate through the can, through the line, and the more details you provide, the better. So like the F9 notes and those kinds of things.
That's the additional conversations is, documenting the conversations you're having on the front side. So that, so that when it comes down to, you get the call 3 months later, from the adjuster, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you have this conversation? And it's like, well, actually I did. And it's, it's one thing if you document it 3 months later, but if you're documenting it the same day you have that conversation, then you can go back and say, no, actually we did have this conversation on this day, and realizing that it's just facts. There's no emotion involved.
Yeah.
So it is just what it is.
We're here with Raymond Tittman with RJT Associates. He has over 20 years experience working in the legal side of insurance law.
Like most people, I didn't choose insurance. Insurance chose me.
Yeah. Well, and we always try to tell the story of the loss, right? What is the value proposition? What's the need? And then what were the measures that you went and
exactly right.
I like how you said that, a legitimate situation and response. Yeah.
And I think also stay in communication with the carriers. I mean, again, it's when after the fact we get sent bills that there's some resentment. I think to the extent, before you start spending a lot of money and engage in a lot of work, You know, the claim has been reported. You say what you're going to do. You either ask for permission or you say, look, unless you object, we're going to take these measures. If we're being kept informed throughout the process from the carrier perspective, I think we'll be cooperative.
Tell the story of the loss.
The advice I would have there is I think you number one, should make a fair record, or they should make a fair record that there is contamination. If we as insurance companies start getting bills and are asked to pay them, and there's no real evidence of contamination that was cleaned up, then we feel like we're being scammed.
Sure.
So if there's a legitimate request and you can show, okay, here we've taken various tasks or through other means we can verify that there's a situation here, a legitimate situation that we're trying to resolve. I think you'll by and large, you'll find insurance companies want to cooperate. They know it's a crisis for everyone. They want to do what's fair. They just don't like being taken advantage of. So if there's a documented showing that that there was actual exposure in the property in question.
Tell the story of the loss.
And there's real reason to think that there's contamination, and B, that you think you're actually doing something to solve it.
Sure.
You know, as opposed to we're just going door to door, you know, supposedly cleaning up properties and sending you bills.
Yeah.
I think you want to make that showing. And if it's a legitimate showing, I think you'll find more often than not that the carriers will cooperate.
Tell the story of the loss.
What are some of those things, you know, maybe there's a new manager out there or an owner that's trying to hand off and delegate some of those responsibilities. What are some of those early lessons you learned about teaching other people and their learning styles?
Bueller.
Well, and that's adjusters can change or be reassigned, right? Or especially dealing with like a mini CAD or something like that. So it's essential. Follow every phone call with an email, right? Get it in writing. Get it in writing. Get it in writing.
Get in writing. Yep.
Insurance questions. Tip number 1.
Writing this down. This is good stuff.
Insurance questions. Insurance company, I need to write that down.
Writing this down. This is good stuff.
Insurance questions that we get asked a lot. Restoration. Tip number 1. Claims notes. Keep good notes.
Writing this down. This is good stuff.
Right. Get it in writing. Get it in writing. Get it in writing.
Get in writing. Yep.
You know, quick funny story. We had one that really helped. That was actually in this market up north. We went out to an apartment complex, literally poo water. I mean, you got floaties, right?
Right.
Tell people how pitiful your life was before Xactimate.
And so we recommend to the maintenance person, man, this flooring needs to come out. We need to do flood cuts. We need to disinfect. And they said, no, disinfect, extract, leave everything in place. And it's like, oh man.
The way you taught me how to write, the thoroughness is going to just blast past.
Yeah.
Whoever, whatever, it doesn't matter who wrote it.
You got to be kidding. You can literally see this, right? This is the discretionary Cat 2, Cat 3.
You come out with stink like that, poop mouth, poop out of your mouth.
And no, and so it's like, okay, sign this form. We're going to send you an email. We want confirmation in writing that you told us not to do this. You know, even then, I mean, your hairs are tingling, right? Because you know that's not going to cover you. And so the next day we get a call from the supervisor, just mad as all get out. Why didn't you flood cut? You know there was, literally poop sitting on the floor and da-da-da-da-da.
You come out with stink like that.
And it's like, well, excuse me, sir. Here is the form that your maintenance person signed. Here is the email confirming that we had that conversation. Hang on a second.
Poop mouth. Poop out of your mouth.
And then 10 minutes later, we get a call. Oh, can you guys please come out? And oh, I didn't see you there. I was just getting some reading in and listening to a podcast here by some jackwagons. But what they're talking about reminds me of a story that they share in So You Want to Be a Project Manager.
John Isaacson's new book, So You Want to Be a Project Manager.
On page 43, it talks about, embracing, embrace your suck and admitting what you don't know, but also standing for what you do know. In a very similar story,
maybe even the same one about feces, poop. So poop.
And I got so excited, I had a premature ripulation, but I'm so excited I've got my So You Want to Be a Project Manager book.
When you're a project manager, when you're working in the restoration world, we see lots of weird and awkward things often. And so it's good to have a resource like So You Want to Be a Project Manager to help you get a handle on how to prepare yourself for career advancement and leading others and really grasping the restoration industry. I'd recommend it. In fact, I wrote it.
It has a cover, it has pages, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
And what was so great about that is now moving forward, whenever we got pushback from that particular group, we could say, hey, your regional supervisor, this is the way they want this approach. They want it done the right way. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? But
right.
And you can't abuse that and use it out of line. But it was moving forward.
No, and I think it is important to be able to think about those things down the road. Is whether you want to put your name on, stamp your name, whether it's your personal name or your company name onto that product. Because it is your reputation, that service that you provide.
Be tricky. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like if you're doing program work or you're doing, in that particular case, our larger company has a relationship with that company across the board, and things that you do can impact a lot of people, right? And so you have to understand your position in relationship to the bigger entity. You work for an entity, a franchise entity as well, and so. You have to be tactful, to say the least. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But not cross certain lines, right? So our last conversation you had, I want to give you credit. You have definitely restarted the crank on my wheel as far as thinking about personality profiles and whatnot. And what you said was, at a previous job, you had to learn. You were at that point a young person teaching people much older than yourself, and this wasn't in restoration, and getting a lot of resistance. And that company put you through some training that helped you understand different people, have different personalities, different ways that they learn, and that's really helped you in that position and moving forward. So I think that's such a critical component, is remembering if you are an owner and you're delegating, you're a new manager, you're trying to learn how to lead other people. It's not just, well, I know more than you, or they made me a manager, or, Joyce Gabriel saying, well, I'm the senior PM, So don't be dumb, respect my authority. If you're trying to do it the right way, you're trying to help other people. Exactly like you said, I like that. My wife worked in education as well, the individualized education plan. If you want people to succeed, there's ways to go about that, ways to navigate that. So what have you learned about working with different personalities and trying to help them, specifically with Xactimate?
Xactimate Sessions.
Any pieces you can offer to our tens of listeners?
I think that when it comes to training people with different personalities, it comes to sometimes you have to just be blunt and to the point and be like, these are the bullet points. This is what you need to do to get it corrected. And then following back up with them. And then there are some people you need to say, hey, you really hit it here. You really hit it here. Your scope was great here. Let's look at focusing on how we can better adjust this particular area. So it's, some people appreciate that very black and white, hey, fix it here, 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 right? Yeah. And some people need that positive reinforcement, fix it here, and then positive reinforcement again. And then some people, yes, the sandwich effect. And then some people need to actually be able to see it. I had a project manager that I'm working with where his scope was not accurate.
Yeah.
I had gone in and revised his scope to make sure that our team was set up for success. And then went out yesterday. We finished training probably 2 months ago, but we went out on a water loss yesterday. And it was walking through that again and just offering, hey, you're doing really great. Let's focus on this part. And
hire a young guy, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And then expect within a very quick amount of time
Yeah.
for them to grab the keys to a van and go be a lead tech.
Yeah.
Interacting with clients, adjusters, public adjusters,
Yeah.
Industrial hygienists,
University reps.
There's no way.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. It's like, no, we're doing this wrong. They all can learn the technical.
Right.
We've got to, everybody's like, well, I'm not their mother and I'm not their school.
Yeah.
You are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you got them.
Yep.
And, you can either choose to train them and make wonderful employees who appreciate it, or you can keep hiring and firing, hiring and firing, hiring and
that
firing.
vicious cycle. Yeah.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance. I know there's a lot riding on it, but it's all psychological. Just got to stay in a positive frame of mind.
I mean, the technical side is the easier side to learn. I'm not necessarily repairs, because you do have to be skilled to be a carpenter, a good carpenter. But even like with the carpentry, I tell people if we had carpenters that were moderately skilled but had great rapport with the customer, we could walk through and you could see things that were kind of like, not the best, and they're just happy as all get out. Whereas we'd have a contractor go in there that maybe is just, phenomenal, but they're terrible with people, and they're just picking them apart, And so, your customer, like you said, that in-home behavior goes a long way.
So, from Joyce Gabriel, Senior Project Manager, what are 3 things every intentional estimator should train their mindset and habits if they want to, whether they're starting out with Xactimate or just want to step their game up and maybe also, so I guess that's a 3-part question. If you're training and helping others, right? Some practical things in that regard. So if that isn't a broad enough and multifaceted enough question.
Bueller.
3 points. I think the first one comes back to making sure you're painting a clear picture of what needs to be done, what was done, and what needs to be done. Capturing all of the charges. When I'm writing an estimate, I tend to tell people I'm going to write it for, say, a 7-day dry out. So if it takes 5, I'm not stickering, I'm not giving them sticker shock at the end where, hey, you said it was going to take 5, but it took 7.
Oh, God! Oh, God! Oh, my God! Oh, God!
But painting a clear picture of why what needs to be done needs to be done. There are people who want to save cat-free carpet, and it just can't be done.
Yeah.
So remembering what you initially scoped it out as, what you said should happen, right? And then versus what actually did happen.
Yeah.
And that's twofold. You can see where maybe you missed it on your initial scope, so that your future scopes are more effective and more accurate. And it helps paint that picture better. And then you can also, if you're in a position where you're also helping train new production techs or crew chiefs, you can have those different conversations of why it was scoped one way versus what was actually performed. So remembering your scope. Yeah. And I think the other one is no matter how versed you are or how seasoned you are, lean on your resources.
Once you get to the point where you're not willing to listen or not willing to learn, F you, pound sand.
We are in an ever evolving industry. And so it allows you to, even if you're seasoned, it allows you to remain current and effective and competitive.
I think there comes a point, would you agree, where you have to advocate for yourself and learn to sell to your company what you believe will be a win-win-win, right?
Absolutely. One of my key terms that I've tried to instill in the people that I work with is being a value-added employee. And the more valuable you are, the less disposable you are, first off, right? When you hit into hard times. but also the more competitive you are to other people, to other companies.
Yeah.
And so if you are a hot commodity to other companies, you then also become more valuable to your company because they see the value in you.
Clearly you're French, right? You've got the accent aigu on the end of your E. So is it Robert Murray?
That's correct. Yes.
Is it? Did I nail it? Okay.
You did.
You just wrapped up your triple IICRC master. You got the water, fire, and textiles, right? So,
yep.
I mean, that takes a commitment not only on your part, but I mean, somebody's got to back it. That's a investment of a lot of hours and a lot of money. Right? How were you able to convince people to get behind that?
So I didn't really have to convince anybody to back that. And the owner there, he's the one that actually came to me and said, you need to get certified. You need to invest in yourself and your career. If this is where you want to be at. Because I came into his franchise as a journeyman in all three, and told him I was on this path, and he was very supportive. Said, okay, I'm fine with you doing that. So because ultimately it helped the company as a whole. So
yeah, it sounds like you've found places where people invest in the people. And how have you seen that as far as like advocating for your team as well?
Well, first of all, I use myself as an example, and I push them to be more like me, I guess. I hate to say it that way, but I push them to be more like me, have my kind of passions, because I think it was Simon Sinek who said that passion is an output. So if you're putting into them passion, you should get out of them passion.
Yeah.
So and the owner should reap the return on investment on that by getting the education. They'll be able to help the customers better, and helping the customers better, the business should be affected as a whole. Yeah.
I can hear Eric and Larry saying amen. That's their whole thing. So
well, and I listen to Eric and Larry too, kind of where I got that from too. So
yep.
No, I'm excited about today. It's good. We've got the 3 podcast summit going on.
These are some winners.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Larry from the Blue Collar Nation, and I'm here with my tech whispering business partner, Mr. Eric Sprague. And we have a great show set up for you folks. We have very funny antics, and it's happening already, and I'm looking forward to it totally. Yes.
Excited about this. Excited about this.
So anyway, let's get to our guests. Speaking of John and Jarrett, we're very excited today.
Excited about this.
Jarrett has an amazing podcast, the GMS podcast, and he is the owner of...
It's not that great.
We're going to get to you in a minute, John.
It's really pretty pathetic.
Oh, boy.
Man, you are one pathetic loser. No offense.
It's way better than the GMS podcast.
I did want to add, I've read John's books, and you can find those at any discount bookstore all over.
And I also noticed when I went through, so when I first started here, I didn't have WRT. And so then I went through WRT, and it made my scopes more accurate. And it filled in the gaps that I had, because all of my training had been on the job. And so it filled in the gaps that I had, and my scopes became more effective. So then what I noticed was that I started getting more mold jobs.
Yeah.
And recognizing that I had gaps in my education. So then I came back and I was talking to my management, and I was like, look, I would really like AMRT to fill in the gaps that I know that I have. And as soon as I went through AMRT, recognized the gaps, was fixing those things within my education and within our company so that we were doing things accurately, I sold more mold jobs.
Yeah.
So then actually the owner came back and said, well, if you do this internal training that we have and you complete it, then I will send you to commercial drying. And I said, I'll do it. And I did it in a month. I finished all of our internal training. And he said, all right, you find out when the next commercial training is. And then breakfast. it hit. So, so I was not able to attend commercial drying yet. It's made me more confident in my bids because I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So,
It increases
and
your
then
confidence. Yep.
yeah, and then you become more valuable to the company because you're selling these large projects and you're bringing in more revenue. And I think that sometimes that's when you're talking to somebody who's very finance focused, that's a great way to put it, but it benefits you in the long run.
Yeah.
So
I think those are great points Joyce makes about if you're a technician or a manager trying to get your owner or manager to sign off on giving you more education, more access maybe to industry events and those kinds of things, you have to think like an owner. So how does sending to this class benefit the team or the company? How is that going? How do you plan to take that and move that into something of value, not just for yourself, but for the company, for the organization? And Joyce talks about just like that, right? Knowing more about the water damage through the WRT or mold through the AMRT helps to be more confident in the terminology and approaching the customer with not just the physical ability, the technical skill, but the terminology and the science and the background kind of more behind it. So you're talking more confidently to your customer, to your team members, and selling more effectively. She also makes a great point, and I'm so glad that she joined us for this part of it, in talking about understanding and speaking to different people on their level to help. You can't approach every employee the same way. So finding a way to connect with the employee that you're trying to train, make the training relevant, interactive, and engaging so that they can incorporate it into their work. So spending a little extra time when you're doing your training so that way you don't have to do it over and over again, even though a lot of things that we do are repetitive and you get better as you do them. But make your training effective by understanding who you're talking to.
when you work with somebody who maybe doesn't have technical experience, but they have the customer service background, and you start explaining the technical part of it, and they struggle with it, you can come from that approach of now you are becoming a value-added employee. You know, you have that key customer service part, and now you can provide the education and support to your customers, and you can provide that scope of work to your people you're supporting. So, yeah.
If you're strong in this area, you can supplement it with, help from other people and training and vice versa, right? Everybody's got their strengths and you want to build on those. So awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Joyce.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
We make our living grinding the bones of adjusters and drinking their blood.
The typical contractor, right? We'll hold your thumb up to the wind.
Yeah. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal.
Is that I can say anything to anyone. It's just in my approach.
Yeah.
So being able to speak to them where they're at, gauge what their communication style is, and speak to them that way. Yeah. And that's been a huge cornerstone for me.
Kind of trying to understand where somebody else is coming from and achieve success by working with them rather than against them.
There's a lot of things that come natural to people, and if you build on those strengths, acknowledging where they are, building on their strengths, and making sure they're in the right fit for their position, because you can only force a square block into a round hole so much. But when you find them a good fit and you're communicating with them in the right place, they can be successful, and when they're successful, you're successful.